On this episode of the Just in Time podcast with Justin Kutcher.
Miguel Cabrera hit balls out to right center field like ping pong balls. I mean, it was unbelievable, you know. And I believe to this day that Edgar Renteria set Nagy up. He jumped away from a curveball the first pitch like it really fooled him, and Nagy came back with another one, which was a good one. And Edgar just stuck his nose in there and went out and got it, hit a line drive up the middle. I can remember Verlander throwing 100 miles an hour in the seventh inning one day in Boston. Eighth inning in Boston, one of the best games he ever pitched. What do you think about having to face Doc Gooden tonight? And Bonds said, well, he ought to be worried about facing me.
The greatest sports moments happen in seconds, but the stories behind them are timeless. Dive into the mind of the icons who live those moments. No filters, just authentic conversations about the moments that define careers. I'm Justin Kutcher, and this is the Just in Time podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Just in Time podcast with Justin Kutcher. For those of you who know me, you know that I am a baseball junkie. It's my first love. I think back to when I was growing up playing catch with my dad every day when he would come home. So this episode is really special to me because I have someone joining us right now who is as much of a baseball junkie as you can get. He's a Hall of Fame manager, managed the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Colorado Rockies, the Florida Marlins, the Detroit Tigers, Mr. Jim Leyland. Jim, thank you so much for joining me here. It's awesome to have you.
Great to be on with you, Justin. I appreciate it.
We're going to talk a lot about the major leagues, but if we can, I got my start in minor league baseball, broadcasting minor leagues. I want to know from your perspective, how did managing in the minors kind of set you up for your career in the majors?
Well, it's a process. Obviously, you learn how to handle players, and you learn how to work with players on a daily basis to develop them and to try to get them better. That's your job in the minor leagues, is to try to get your players to get the most out of their ability so that they can move forward onto their careers. And so it's a very interesting concept, really. It's a little bit different, obviously, than managing the major leagues. You're still trying to win in the minors and everything, but development comes first. So it's a little bit different. When you get to the big leagues, obviously, it's all about winning. So it was a very interesting concept for me, and I did it for a long time, 11 years in the minors. So really, it's about building relationships and learning how to handle the different people, and certainly also involved is the players from different countries where there's a little bit of a language barrier at times. You got to get through that. So it's just a very, very interesting concept.
I was watching your Hall of Fame induction speech the other day, and you said one of the great things about being a minor league manager is being able to promote a player. And one of the players that you promoted was a Hall of Famer, Jack Morris. At what point, when you saw Jack Morris pitch in the minors, did you think he's got something?
Well, that particular year that I managed him, he was with the big league club, obviously, in spring training. He got sent down. He probably should have made the team, but he didn't. It was one of those things where it was kind of a numbers thing. But, I saw him in spring training, obviously, so I could tell, that he had a lot going for him, and he probably should have made the ball club. But when he came down to me in AAA at Evansville, he was a little upset. And, it was a little tough to work with to start with because he was so disappointed and frustrated that he didn't make the team. But, I told him the cold, hard facts. I said, you can come down here and sit around and pout and not get back up to Detroit until August or something. But you can come down here and, go about your business the right way, do what you're supposed to do. You'll be out of here a short period of time. Probably I'll never see you again. So, that's up to you. And he mentioned that at his Hall of Fame speech, how I gave him some tough love, and I did. But I basically just told him the facts, the way it was, and it worked out good. So I think he was maybe 4-1 or 3-1 for me. Made just a few starts, and they called him up to the big leagues. So, very rewarding. But you're a small piece of that career, and Jack and I are best of friends. So, it worked out great.
I think it's really a foreshadowing of your career. You said you gave him the cold, hard facts, tough love. I feel like a lot of people say that about you, that's your managing style. That's the way you've always been. How did that kind of develop where you just said, you know what, I'm going to tell these guys as it is?
Well, there's the old saying, honesty is the best policy. And, sometimes you have to have some tough conversations with players. There's no question about that. But when you're upfront with players, they might be upset for a day or two, but if you're not upfront with them, they're going to be upset forever. So I believe that's the best way to do it. You just have to tell them exactly the way it is and what they need to do to get themselves to the big leagues. And some players can handle it, some players can't. But for the most part, you can look in the mirror as your own person and say, hey, I was dead honest with the guy. I looked him right in the eye. I told him the truth. And like I said, sometimes it hurts for a day or two. They're upset with you, but they're not upset with you too long. So I think that's the best way to go about it.
Can you think back to some of those conversations, some instances where you were honest and they kind of looked at you like, "Are you kidding me?" And then they came around to see what you were doing, that it was actually for their own good.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's moments when players are frustrated. I think that's why every now and then you got to sleep on it overnight before you approach the player because you want to give him time to simmer a little bit and calm down a little bit. And then I think it's always best to have the conversations after that. But, I mean, players appreciate that. They want you to be totally honest with them. And like I said, even though it hurts temporarily, at the long haul, it always seems to work out.
Yeah, if we were to jump forward and what you said about managing in the minor leagues, your first job as a big league manager was with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and you start with them in 1986. That was a really young group. So that was Barry Bonds' rookie year. You've got a lot of young guys. Did it feel almost like an extension of from your jobs managing in the minors to now having this young team in the majors?
Well, a little bit, but we did have a few veteran players, and we had to make some trades. Obviously, the big trade was the year after I managed on April Fool's Day when we traded Tony Pena. We did have some veteran players. We were not a good team. And then we were in the process of breaking in some young guys, and Sid Thrift did a good job of that when he went out and traded and got Judd Draybeck and Brian Fisher and people like that came in and helped the club. And then Bonds was the signee, number one pick the year before. Jeff King came a little bit later than that. But yeah, we had to, we were starting from scratch basically, and we had to move some of the veteran players, because we knew we weren't going anywhere at that time. So it was a little bit of an extension of that, obviously, but breaking in young players in the big leagues is always a fun thing. You have to be very patient with them. They're going to have their moments. They're going to have some tough times, and things kind of go back and forth occasionally. So it's a matter of patience, but it's also a matter of talent. When you saw a guy like Barry Bonds, that you knew you had a special player. It didn't take long to figure that out. We had a young Bobby Bonilla, uh, eventually Jay Bell and guys like that. You could see that the ability was there, and it was just a matter of getting those guys some experience, some playing time. Players get better by playing. That's how they get better. And every once in a while, some of those young players come up, and you got to send them back down to the minors for a little while. They're not quite ready yet, and that's always an interesting concept too. So there's a lot that goes on when you're breaking in young players, especially at the major league level, because like I said, the minor leagues about development, but the major leagues about winning. So you break those players in, and hope that they continue to make their progress. Like I said, we traded Tony Pena, brought in Andy Van Slyke, a young player from the Cardinals, and things like that. So yeah, it's all very interesting. It's a very big job. It takes a lot of patience, but at the end of the day, it always takes honesty. And when you break those players in, it's a fun thing.
I think to that first year as a manager, and you've managed in the minor leagues, but at what point when you're now the manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates does it dawn on you like, wow, I'm managing in the big leagues? That this everything kind of starts and stops with me calling the shots.
Well, I had managed a long time in the minor leagues, so I felt like I was ready. You never know for sure if you're ready to manage a major league club, but I had coached 4 years for Tony La Russa with the White Sox, so he's a Hall of Fame manager as well. Obviously, one of the greatest of all time, second all time wins. So I had to I got that opportunity to coach for him for a few years. So, I felt like I was ready, but you never know and really till you take the reins, and you come in. And I always had a philosophy that, the general manager, you give me the players, I'll take whoever you give me, but once you give them to me, let me manage the players. Don't interfere with that. I didn't interfere with him getting the players, and I didn't want the general manager to interfere with me managing the players. So it's a little bit different in today's game. But back in those days, they gave you the reins and you ran with them.
I was just thinking, how would you work in today's game?
Well, I'd be fine because I think it's all about uh, relationships with players and getting them to, your job as a manager is to always to try to get, as I said in my Hall of Fame speech, it's to try to get the best version of the player. That's your job as a manager and a coach. I don't think I'd have any problem at all. I think it's totally different. It's harder to manage in today's game than it was when I managed, that's for sure. But I don't think I would have any problem at all because I think it's all about getting the players to play hard on a consistent basis, to come to beat the team every day, beat the other team every day. As long as you do that, you come to the clubhouse with the thought process that, hey, I'm coming here today to beat the other team. And when you do that, the manager can't ask any more than that. So I don't think I'd have any problem at all. I guess there's probably more interference with the manager in today's game. And I'm old, but I'm not old school. I know there's some new information and maybe some better information. We had all that when I managed, but there's more of it today.
Right.
And with so-called analytical process and all that, which is basically analytics to me is a fancy word for information. But I don't think I'd have any problem at all because it's about building relationship with players and getting them to play hard on a daily basis, and I think I could do that.
I have no doubt that you'd be great with the players. My concern would be, could a GM actually go hands off and let you do your thing? And I feel like the young GMs these days, they almost try to say, "Hey, here's who you're playing. Here's where you're going to have a pitching change," as opposed to letting you do your job and manage with your gut.
Well, that's one thing. I mean, I would have conversations with the general manager, and I would be receptive to any information that they wanted to give me prior to the game. But once the game started, I would manage the game, and I would pull the pitcher when I thought it was time to pull the pitcher. I would make the lineup out that I thought was the best lineup to play that day. I would listen to any input that they wanted to have. I would listen to that prior to the game. I would take any information and see how to use that and how it helps us win a game. But I would not have somebody making a lineup out for me or telling me when to pull a pitcher. I would not tolerate that. I mean, and I wouldn't be upset or mad or with the general manager or anything. I would get along great with him, and I would listen to any information that he wanted to give me. But when the game starts, I got to manage the game, not somebody up in the stands.
Trust me, you are preaching to the choir right now. I think anybody who messes with a manager is crazy. And that is something that I loved about you and your relationship with Dave Dombrowski. He brought you to the Marlins in 97. He brought you back to the Tigers in '06. What was that relationship like?
Well, that relationship actually started in Chicago. A lot of people forget that. They don't know that. Dave and I were together with the Chicago White Sox in 1986. He was basically a young executive coming up, working his way as to be a farm director and eventually a general manager. So I knew Dave back then,
Wow.
and then I managed against his teams when I was managing the Pirates. He was at Montreal. And then when he went to Florida, after a while, obviously, when I left Pittsburgh after 11 years, Dave asked me if I would be interested in managing the Marlins. And then later on, we were with Detroit together. It was a great relationship. I managed for him for 10 years. He was great. He's a great general manager. He's a great general manager in any era. There's no question about that. So, uh, it was a great relationship. And Dave's a baseball guy, and he has some of the new stuff, the analytical stuff, and everything. But he's basically a baseball guy, and he gave me the players, and he let me manage them.
He got you some good players on that '97 team. He went out and kind of just put together a team that wasn't people weren't used to seeing. But one of the guys that he brought back for you, or it just so it's happened, was Bobby Bonilla. What was it like reuniting with Bonilla on that 97 Marlins team?
Well, I loved it. It's funny how the baseball world works. And when Bobby was with the Mets, he had a tough time with the media, and it was a tough place for him. And Bobby Bonilla is a great, just a wonderful, wonderful person, and he was one heck of a player. He had one heck of a career. But just to show you how things work, going from the Mets and coming to the Marlins, he was the most popular guy in the media in Florida, and maybe one of the more unpopular guys in New York. So it's just sometimes where you are, the timing of everything, and how things work out in the different markets. Baseball is a very funny game, and Bobby Bonilla just one of my all-time favorites, and just a really, really good player, and very instrumental in helping us win that World Series, particularly in Game 7 when he hit the home run and got another big hit. So it's just funny how things work in baseball. Some places don't work out too good for players, and other places do.
What is it about sports where that was 1997? So we're almost 30 years removed. And you remember games like it was just yesterday. Like you said, Bonilla, game 7, home run, also had a hit. How come players, managers are able to remember games as if they just happened yesterday?
Well, I think it's just in your blood. I mean, once you're a baseball guy, I can remember lineups from Class A teams that I managed. My memory's pretty good on stuff like that. So, when you're in it, like I've been 60 some years, you've had a lot of experiences, and I don't remember everything, to be honest with you, right to the T, but I remember a lot of that. But it's just, you have a flashback of a certain game, and somebody will bring up a certain player that played for you at some point, and it all comes back to you. So it's just kind of implanted in that brain, I guess, at a certain point, and it just kind of stays in there forever.
What was it like trying to mold that 97 team? Because you mentioned, Bonilla, Al Leiter, Kevin Brown, Moises Alou, Gary Sheffield, Edgar Renteria, Jeff Conine, Charles Johnson. They're a bunch of huge names. And you come in and have to mold it together to be a team. How'd you get that team to buy in and be one?
Well, I never pushed myself on the players. I always tell young managers, you know, don't tell the players what you know, show the players what you know by the way you run your spring training, by the way you run your camp, by the way you handle the players, by the way you do your drills. Show the players what you know. Don't tell them what you know. They're not interested in that. They want to see you in action as a manager, and you, as a manager, you realize it's all about the players. We had some really good players on that team, and you know, everybody said afterwards, well, they went out and got so many players, that's why they won the World Series. But nobody picked us to win the World Series. Nobody, and that was always funny to me. After it was all over, they said, well, they should have won, but nobody picked us to win. I don't know what the odds were on us to win the World Series, but that team just came together. And I think it all started in spring training, which was actually scary for me because we were 26-5 in spring training. And I was nervous about it because I thought, these fans are going to think we're never going to lose a game.
Yeah.
But it all came together. We had good character. Those players were really good guys, along with really good players, and that's what kind of helps out. You kind of let the players think that they're running the show, and you're quietly kind of doing it yourself with your coaching staff and your general manager and the organization together. But you want the players to believe that they're the biggest part of it, and understand how good they are. And this was really a good team, and I think it's in one case where the best team in baseball won the World Series in 1997. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And the best team doesn't always win the World Series. I thought we might have had the best team later on in Detroit one year. We didn't win it, but
Right.
that team just came together and got confidence, and we got past the Atlanta Braves, who had 5 Hall of Fame players and a Hall of Fame manager.
Yeah.
So it's not easy. It's pretty tough.
Okay. So who was the leader of that team? Maybe it's the vocal leader or just the leader in the clubhouse.
Well, I think there was a lot of them. I think
Okay.
some guys are leader. They're a little more boisterous than others, and some guys are quiet leaders. But I didn't believe so much in the clubhouse stuff. I believed on the field. I think I always said the leaders are the guys that get big hits for you at the big time of the game or pitch a good game when you really need it. That's your leader. I didn't really need a leader in the clubhouse. We had a great clubhouse, but we had different personalities, which you always do. But the leaders are the guys that do something when the umpire says play ball. That's the kind of leaders I want.
You beat the Braves. The Braves were like your nemesis when you're with Pittsburgh. What did it mean? Was it anything extra special to finally get over that hurdle and beat them and get to the World Series?
Well, there was, but it was different because we did it in Miami and not in Pittsburgh. I wish we could have done it in Pittsburgh as well, obviously, which we had great games with them. We just didn't quite get past them. But when we got to Miami, we did. We actually played very well against them all season when we were in Miami. We beat them pretty good during the regular season, and then we were able to carry that over into the postseason. But it was two totally separate deals, really. One was with Pittsburgh and one was with the Marlins, so it was different.
Yeah.
I wish we could have done it in Pittsburgh, but we didn't. But when we got to Florida, we finally did it. So very rewarding. But I didn't really match up the two things too much. I think it was the two totally separate teams.
How much did the Game 7 experiences in the NLCS with Pittsburgh against the Braves help you in Game 7 of the World Series against the Indians?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, you always learn from experience, but each ball game is a new day. It's a new chapter of the season, really. It's a new page in the book for a season. So, you learn over the years, but, sometimes it's just getting a break here or there. We didn't make a double play that we could have made in that Game 7 against the Braves when I was with Pittsburgh. Chico Lim was one of the best second basemen in all of baseball. Freaky things happen. We had Barry Hill struck out. We didn't get the call. But no complaints. I mean, they won, we lost. That's just the way it goes. And when we got to Florida, we won and they lost. So it was very rewarding, obviously, but it was really two separate organizations and two separate games. And Game 7 was one of the greatest games I've ever been involved in all my life. But you learn, but you realize it's about the players. If somebody executes or gets a big hit at the right time, like Edgar Renteria did, they didn't. We did. We win the game. They lose the game.
What are the emotions, the nerves like in that Game 7 of the World Series? Game 7 of an NLCS, you have a chance to go to the World Series. Game 7 of the World Series, you're going to have your name in history. How fast is your heart beating in the dugout as the game is going on and now you're in extra innings?
Well, you're really concentrating. You're doing your job, so it's not so much that it's that you're all heart beating so fast or anything like that. There's 67,000 people at that game. You don't even really realize how many people are there because you're doing your job. You're working. So you don't really, you're kind of oblivious to a lot of stuff that's going around you. You're just concentrating on what you're doing with your team and trying to get your players in the best situation to be successful. So, it's not really like you're that nervous or anything. You're concentrating on your job and, obviously the heart's beating, but you're really concentrating on just what you're doing. So it's not so much of a nerve-wracking thing.
I think back to 1997, and at that point, there was a big difference between the National League and the American League. You didn't have the DH in the National League. So that Game 7 is in your home ballpark. Is there an advantage in your eyes that you had all the experience of the double switches and when to use them and how to use them, as opposed to an American League manager who never had to deal with that?
Well, I think there's some truth to that probably, but I think at the same time, I always thought I'm totally different than most people. I think it's tougher to manage in the American League than it was in the National League.
Really?
And and I'll explain that. But the National League was more fun because you were doing more with the double switches and things like that. There was more going on. But actually, in the National League, your decision to take a pitcher out was made for you by the score of the game. In other words, a guy could be pitching a pretty good game, but if you got to a certain point, you had to get him out because you had to pinch hit maybe you were behind or something. So you had to. So my point is, in the American League, you have to be actually more precise when you take that pitcher out, because with the DH, you don't have to worry about the double switch and everything, but you have to be more precise when you take that pitcher out. In the National League, a lot of time your decision is made for you by the score of the game. So you have to pinch hit and you have to do some other things, but I think it's tougher to because you got to pinpoint when to get that pitcher out in the American League, where in the National League that's dictated for you a lot by the score of the game.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Do you miss that in baseball, that there's no more double switches?
Yeah, but I think the double switch was really overrated. I think some managers, and this is not critical of anybody. I made as many mistakes as anybody. So, but my point is, I think people could fall in love with that double switch, and it made it look like to the fans and the media that, oh, this guy's really managing. He's double switching. He's doing this and that. I didn't like the double switch unless I was short of pitching. That's when I double switched. I didn't double switch just to double switch, and I think some guys did, to be honest with you. And I think it's a mistake. I think you had to be very careful with that.
I love it. Take me back to Renteria, the World Series winning hit, and the arms go up in the air. Everything happens. When that ball goes into center field, what's going through your mind?
Well, that was unbelievable for me, to be honest with you, because I was working hard on my lineup. I had one player left, and I was getting short of pitching. We were extra innings, so I was really concentrating. So when Devon White came up prior to Edgar Renteria, the infield's in, the outfield's in. I'm thinking, just hit a fly ball, we win the World Series. He happened to hit on the first pitch. He hit a ground ball to second base from Tony Fernandez, who forced the guy at home. So now all of a sudden everybody on defense is back to their normal positions, and now you got to get a base hit to win this game. And I was looking at my lineup card. I looked up at the first pitch that Nagy threw to Renteria, and it was a strike. He kind of jumped back on a breaking ball, and he kind of jumped back, and then I look back down to my lineup card, and I look up the second time, and boom, there's a base hit, and it's all over. Everything that you were working on and you were planning for, you don't have to worry about anymore. It was such a relief, and I believe to this day that Edgar Renteria set Nagy up. He jumped away from a curveball the first pitch like it really fooled him, and Nagy came back with another one, which was a good one. It was actually off the plate, down and away a little bit, and Edgar just stuck his nose in there and went out and got it, and hit a line drive up the middle. So that was, it was like all the pressure in the world of looking at your lineup and everything, and then all of a sudden all the pressure's off because he gets his base hit. I mean, it's hard to explain that feeling to somebody.
Wait a minute, time out. You think that Renteria really set up Nagy in the game 7?
I do.
Holy cow!
Yeah, I do. I think to this day, I kidded Edgar about it, and a few times since then we laughed about it. And he never really said yes 100% that he did, but every time I said, "You set him up, didn't you?" He got a big smile on his face.
Oh my gosh. I've heard stories about Manny Ramirez doing that. I've heard stories of Greg Maddux as a pitcher doing that. But to think about in game 7 of a World Series to do that, and Renteria was a young kid.
Yeah, but a very smart player, very great baseball instincts, really, really smart. And I believe to this day that there's no question about it. He was looking for the breaking ball, and he got it again, and he went out and got it and hit that line drive up the middle. There's no doubt in my mind that he did that.
That is amazing. Oh my gosh, that is such great information right there. Okay, so you and I actually have, a bond in ways, because I was the broadcaster for the Tigers AA affiliate, the Erie Seawolves, in 2005. And that team, we had Justin Verlander, Joel Zumaya, Don Kelly, Mike Rabello, all these guys. But obviously Verlander and Zumaya were the two big ones. When I saw them, I was like, whoa, these guys are studs. You take over in 2006. What was the process like naming those players to your big league team?
Well, that's a very interesting question because there's a very interesting story behind this. When I went there, I asked Dave Dombrowski. I said, "Are you going to let me take who I want?" And he said, "Well, within reason." And so, very shortly after spring training started, I told Dave Dombrowski one day, I pointed, we were having a conversation and we were kind of getting our workout started. And I said, well, I want to take that guy and I want to take that guy. And it was Verlander and Zumaya. He said, and he looked at me, he said, well, he said, they're young. And he said, you don't know what they're going to do. And I said, you're right. I don't know what they're going to do, but I do know what those guys that you've had in the past few years are going to do. You've been getting beat pretty good. I know what they're going to do. So I want to take a chance on these guys. And Dave was great about it. And we agreed to let's take them, and the rest is history.
What did you see in those two guys that made you say, I want them?
Well, they were just special. They were special arms. They were special guys. They were special competitors. You could see it all over them. These guys were the real deal. I mean, I always believed in talent, not so much experience. I like talent, and I don't care how young they are, how old they are. I'm a big believer in talent, and those guys were more talented than probably anybody we had.
You know what? Justin Verlander has gone on to prove that correct. Obviously, Joel Zumaya got hurt, but Verlander, I've heard a story, I think it was during his rookie year, where it was maybe the seventh or the eighth inning, and you went out to the mound. He thought he was coming out, and you told him to finish it. What happened? What is that story?
Yeah, well, I think he thought that I was coming out to take him out, and I was just coming out really to pump him up. I said, "Look, you're the best guy we got. Leaving you in the pitch right here is better than somebody we're going to be bringing in from the bullpen. So just go get him. This is your game." And I'll never forget that. And of course, he took the bull by the horns and finished. And uh, we just had a great relationship. He knew when I was going to take him out in games, and he used to play games with me when he'd come off after pitching 6, 7 innings or something, and he pitched deep into the games, and I'd be waiting for him to congratulate him, and every once in a while he'd walk the other way because he knew I was going to take him out. But no, guys like him and Scherzer, they're still pitching today.
Yep.
And I pitched them, and they threw pitches, and they're still pitching today. So, we must have done a few things right with them, I hope.
There's no doubt you did. And people now talk about pitch counts, right? If as a player gets close to 100, with guys like Verlander, with guys like Scherzer, did you look at the pitch count or did you just watch what they were doing on the mound?
Oh, I watched the game. I watched the game. Obviously, the pitch count, you know what the pitch count is. But, I watched how the hitter was reacting. The hitter the other team usually tells you when to take a pitcher out.
Yep.
You don't have to be a rocket scientist, but if he's mowing them down and not having any problems, I let him pitch. And, if they were getting roughed up a little bit, I took them out. But that could have been in the second inning. I mean, the guy could have a bad game and be getting, sometimes you got to take him out early, but other times Verlander and those kind of guys, they started out throwing 93, 92, 93. And then when they had to amp it up a little bit, they amped it up. I can remember Verlander throwing 100 miles an hour in the seventh inning one day in Boston, eighth inning in Boston. One of the best games he ever pitched. I think he shut him out 2-0. So those guys, the guys today come out right from the get-go, throwing a little bit max effort right from the get-go. And back when I managed, the guys came out and they kind of paced themselves. And then if they got in trouble, they had extra in the tank. Today they kind of come out full throttle right away.
Yeah. With Verlander, rookie year, with that conversation where you kept him in, how do you think that translated to the rest of his career with his mindset?
Well, I hope it helped him. I've never really asked him about it, but I hope it helped him that I was showing confidence in him, and this is your game, and you're the best guy we got to get this hitter out at this particular time, and I just like I said, when you manage, I watched the game. You had all your preparation. I'm a big believer that they talk in today's world about scripting the game. They're going to have this guy's going to pitch 4 innings, and then we're going to bring this guy in, and that. Well, I don't believe you can script a game. I believe you plan for a game. I believe you have a plan A, B, C, and D, and you can, if you say you want to script a game, he's going to go 4 innings. Well, what happens if he's giving up 4 or 5 runs in the first inning and getting knocked around? I mean, my common sense tells me you got to get him out of there sometimes. So, It's just a little bit different in today's game. They're more conscientious of the innings they pitch and how many innings they pitch and how many innings they go beyond what they did last year. I understand all that stuff, but I'm not a big believer in that.
I'm with you. And by the way, Justin Verlander in 2005, I don't know if I've told you this story or not, but when he made his Double-A debut, it was in New Hampshire. And Al Avila, who was the assistant GM at the time to Dave Dombrowski, he was in New Hampshire watching him. And I asked him if he would come on the air with me. So first inning, he came on the air, and Verlander, first batter, faced a righty, went 91, 94, 97, gone. Next batter, righty, 91, 94, 97, gone. Third batter was a lefty. He goes 91, 94, 94, ball one. The first non-strike he's thrown. So it's 1-2, and he throws a curveball. The hitter's knees buckled. Verlander never watched the ball cross the plate. He just walked towards the dugout because he knew it was a strikeout. He struck out the first 7 guys he faced, 8 of the first 9. And Avila says on the air, he goes, well, if he keeps on pitching like this, he won't be here very long. That was June. He made his debut in July.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, that's what I saw in spring training. I didn't know Verlander that well when I went there. Obviously, I knew this was a young guy that we had that was coming up that had great stuff, was the number 1 pick. But, you could just see that, he had all the equipment. He had 3 good pitches when I got there. He had a very good fastball, obviously, a good curveball, and a good changeup. He added a slider later, and later in his career, probably the cutter and things like that. He learned how to pitch a little bit differently in Houston than he did when he was with Detroit. He was totally a stuff guy at Detroit for most of the time. And in Houston, then he figured some things out, how to maneuver a little bit and pitch a little bit different. But, everybody said, well, he became a great pitcher in Houston. That's not true. He was a great pitcher in Detroit. Yeah. He was Rookie of the Year. He won Cy Youngs. I mean, this guy's been a great pitcher since day one that he went to the big leagues.
I was going to say, he was a great pitcher in Erie, too.
Yeah, I can believe that.
The guy is a stud, and he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I also mentioned Joel Zumaya because he's another guy that you brought along. And Zumaya in that 2006 season, he was like a cult hero. I mean, people were just salivating over what this guy could do. Was that one of the best arms, if not the best arm you ever saw?
Well, certainly one of the best. And, the people were salivating because they were seeing that, the radar gun on the scoreboard was showing 101, 102, 103, I think he hit. So, people got excited about that. And this was one of the best young arms I've ever managed. There's no question about it. It's just so unfortunate that he got hurt because he could have had a fabulous career and made a lot of money. And it's just one of those sad stories. But, this guy was, he was a dominant reliever. I think it was in the playoffs where he froze Derek Jeter with a fastball 101 miles an hour down and away, and Derek just had no chance. And he knew it. And Derek just kind of tipped his hat. I mean, but this guy was, he was almost a freak at that time. There's more guys doing it now than there was then, throwing that hard. But, this guy was kind of a freak of nature.
To let you know, in 2005, when he actually started, I think it was the second game of the season, but I watched his bullpen and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's got a can. And we had no radar readings. And then he came out and he was throwing 98 to 101. And I'm like, he's different. But he never thought of himself as being a big league pitcher. He's like, I'm never going to make it to the major leagues. And the next year, here he is as a dominant reliever. I always thought he was such a humble guy and such a fun guy to be around. I was so happy for his success. And you mentioned Jeter in the playoffs. I think he got like Jeter, A-Rod, and Sheffield all in like one inning, and they had no shot.
No, there were a lot of guys who didn't have a chance, when he came in. He was just, like I said, he was a little ahead of his time, really. There were some guys in the past that threw hard like that, but for the most part, there's more of them in today's game, obviously. A lot of these guys are throwing harder, but, Zumaya at that time, He was one of the first guys that really come out of the bullpen throwing like that. I mean, I remember Goose Gossage, obviously back when, but Zumaya he was a freak.
That '06 team, uh, you guys have the Magglio Ordonez walk-off to send you to the World Series. That whole ride leading up to the World Series, what was it like, the turnaround in Detroit being a part of that?
Well, I think it really brought baseball back to Detroit. I don't think there's any question about that. I think we surprised a lot of people. I knew when I took the job they had good players. I also knew they didn't have a good team. When I went there, my goal was to turn talent into the team, and we did that. We were able to do that, and the guys all bought in. And I went into spring training lightly to try to show them what I know, not tell them what I know. My coaching staff, we worked with them, and we got off to a good start. You see the atmosphere was being created in spring training. Actually, a little bit on the winter caravan when I met them for the first time. Had some conversations with players. They just didn't know how good they were. They didn't know how good a team they could be. They were kind of individually talented, but they didn't really realize what it took to win as a team. And to their credit, they did that. They jumped on board and they believed, and we got off to a good start and ended up going to the World Series.
When you took that job, you had been away from managing for a few years. What did you do in that time away from the game that helped you with that team in '06?
Well, once again, that's a good question. I actually was working for the St. Louis Cardinals
Right.
when I stepped away from Colorado, and I went to work for Tony La Russa and the St. Louis Cardinals. So I went to spring training every year, and then I scouted for the Cardinals. All the National League teams that came through Pittsburgh at that time, I scouted, and we ended up getting Jeff Supan and Reggie Sanders, and I was really happy about it. So I was still in the game. I was still, had my fingers in a little bit. I might manage a B game for Tony in spring training or something, and worked with Tony organizing his camp and everything. Although he didn't really need help, but so I did that kind of stuff, and it was actually about 3 or 4 years into that when I saw the camaraderie he had on that Cardinal team, and I saw how good it was and how much fun it was. I said, I want to do this again, if the right situation came up. So I think that's the thing that really helped me when I went back.
So now in 2006, you get to the World Series and you're playing the Cardinals and Tony La Russa. What is that like? Obviously, you and La Russa have a very close relationship. Now you're trying to beat each other's brains out and win the World Series. How did that all go about behind
Well,
the scenes?
it was actually good because Tony and I had talked to each other on the phone, and we knew that the media and everything was going to make a big deal about it. That I coached for him, and then I worked with him. I coached for him in
Right.
Chicago, and then I worked with him in St. Louis. So, we knew that there was going to be a lot of storylines about that, but we eliminated that. We downplayed that totally. We both agreed that hey, this is not about us. This is about our teams, and let's keep that kind of stuff away from it. And we did that very successfully.
You did that very successfully for the media. How about for yourselves? Like, would you talk during the World Series, or was it agreed upon, we're not going to talk, friendship goes to the side, we have a job to do?
Yeah, right. No, we didn't talk during the World Series. We talked prior to the World Series about downplaying the fact that we were going to be managed against each other. And once the World Series started, we did not talk at all. It was, we're going to compete. He's going to try to win. I'm going to try to win. But no, we didn't have any conversations during the World Series.
And then what about in the games? Because you know his style, he knows your style. You guys know how each other thinks. What was the chess match like in the games in that series?
Well, I never ever, and this is the truth, I never went into a game ever thinking that I was going to get outmanaged, and I never went into a game thinking that I was going to outmanage somebody. I just managed my players. I didn't worry about the other team. And I kid about this all the time. I said, if the Yankees are beating you by 1 run in the ninth inning, my mom knows that he's going to bring in Mariano Rivera. So, I just tried to concentrate on my players and not worry. I mean, obviously, you knew who he'd pinch hit for. Tony was aggressive, he was going to run some. You knew all those things, but I was more focused on getting my players in a good position and managing my players. I never really worried about the other manager. I had totally respect for every manager I ever managed against, but I didn't really worry about what they did. I worried more about what I did.
It's funny that you just mentioned the Yankees and Mariano Rivera because I think back, Magglio Ordonez took, sorry, not Magglio, my apologies, Miguel Cabrera took Rivera deep, I think in back-to-back games.
Yes, that's correct.
Was that not one of the most impressive hitting performances you'd witnessed?
Yeah, it was unbelievable, really. But it actually, uh, you know, it was better to hit right-hand hitters against Mariano Rivera than it was left-handers. Now, most people think, well, he's a right-hand pitcher, put a left-hander up there. But with that cutter, he just tore left-hand hitters up. And he was actually better. I mean, it was better to hit a right-hand hitter against him. Obviously, Miguel was a right-hand hitter, and he got that cutter out over the plate a couple times, and he took it out of the ballpark. So, that's another thing that strategically people would say, well, why would you pinch hit a right-hand hitter instead of a left-hand hitter? Well, the reason is because that cutter just tore left-hand hitters up.
Yeah. With Miguel, I had the chance to interview you pregame when I was working with Fox doing games, and you said to me in one of those meetings that Miguel Cabrera had power to the opposite field. He would hit to right center as if he were a lefty power hitter.
That's
What
correct.
what
That's
kind of power did he really have? I mean, have you seen that from another right-hander or left-hander in your career with the opposite field power?
No, no. Miguel Cabrera had the best opposite field power at one time than any player I ever saw. I'm not saying there wasn't somebody, I don't know, maybe there was, but I'm talking about guys that I ever saw. Miguel Cabrera hit balls out to right center field like ping pong balls. I mean, it was unbelievable, And I mean, he was such a talented hitter. He was a. It was very interesting. I use this analogy all the time. Miguel Cabrera swung like a little guy, but hit like a big guy.
Oh.
And there are so many guys that swing like a big guy and hit like a little guy. And so, I mean, that's just, he had that elasticity in his swing and just a nice compact swing and powerful. One of the greatest hitters of all time, without question.
You said to me that he would intimidate other teams during batting practice by going around the world. Can you explain what that meant?
Yeah, I used to get mad at him when other teams would come in, especially if they had young players. They'd be out there doing their stretching toward the end of our batting practice, and Miguel hitting the last group, and they'd be kind of watching as they're stretching. And I mean, I saw this time and time. Miguel would hit one dead right field, right center, center field, left field, hit them out of the ballpark. And these guys are just sitting there with their mouth open. And actually, I used to get mad at him because when he did that in batting practice, putting on a show, he didn't hit real good in the games a lot of times. So I told him, you got to knock that off. You got to stop that. But I mean, it was fun to watch. I was tickled inside myself, but I didn't really want him to do it that much. But yeah, the other team would sit there like in disbelief. I mean, it was something to see.
I could almost in my head envision Cabrera flashing that smile when he did it. Like he knew
Oh,
exactly what he was doing.
oh, no question about it. He did it on purpose. He was just putting on a show for the other team and laughing. And I mean, he was something special, and no question about it.
Where do you think he ranks among the best hitters that you've had a chance to be around and manage?
Well, him and Bonds are the best two hitters that I ever had myself. Now, there's been other hitters that, Pujols was awful special. George Brett when I was coaching, guys like that. They were Tony Gwynn, different type hitters, but, great hitters. But certainly Cabrera ranks up there with the greatest hitters of all time.
Speaking of Barry Bonds, when you had him, I said earlier, you had him his rookie year all the way through his first MVP season and even beyond that. Um, the evolution of Bonds he made a really big jump from 1989 to 1990. What happened between those 2 years that you saw him make that jump?
Well, Barry Bonds was one of the hardest workers. A lot of people don't know this that any player ever had. He had a program in the winter. I think it was like a Jerry Rice program from the 49ers where he ran up hills and stuff like that. This guy was being worked out relentlessly. And it was just a matter of, like I say, young players, you got to be patient. And Barry was just one of those young guys that was so talented, and it was going to take him a little time to catch up. And that's what he did. He matured and became the great player that he was. He's one of the greatest players. You could make a case, greatest player of all time. But he's certainly one of the greatest players of all time. It was just about maturity, learning pitchers and things like that. I can remember. This is one of the funniest things. His rookie season, we were in New York. We were going to play the Mets, and Doc Gooden was going to pitch. And I can remember the media in the old Shea Stadium at Bonds mentioning something about, hey, what do you think about having to face Doc Gooden tonight? And Bonds said, well, he ought to be worried about facing me. And the first time up, he took him dead center field.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm not sure if it was the first time he ever faced him, but it was that was the story that happened. He said, well, and he said, well, he ought to be worried about facing me. And the first time up, he took him deep for a home run. I couldn't believe it, And I was out in the clubhouse, so I kind of heard this going on, and that's how I knew about it.
And I mean, for those of you who are watching and listening right now, 1986, this is like prime Doc Gooden. And for a rookie to do that, holy cow.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you saw the stardom in Barry Bonds right away.
well, there's no question about it. I knew we had something special when I first saw him in spring training, and then when he came up, I knew we had something special. And of course, the Mets had something special with Doc Gooden, too. Doc Gooden pitched the first game that I ever managed in the big leagues. Doc Gooden pitched against us. I'll never forget it. And what a talent he was. So, that was quite an accomplishment by Barry. And of course, Doc went on and had a great career as well. So, it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Okay. Wait a minute. First game you manage in your big league career, Doc Gooden with the Mets is on the mound. So that's opening day, 1986. I mean, is there a game plan to go up against him, or you just say to the guys, go do your thing?
Well, I didn't know that much about him other than he was a great young pitcher, but I knew that he didn't hold runners very well. So I knew if we ever got anybody on, which we didn't get many on, I knew that we could run on him. But we lost that game 4-2, but I'll never forget this. They scored 2 runs in the first inning off Rick Russell, who was my pitcher, who was an outstanding major league pitcher. So R.J. Reynolds was leading off for us, the Pirates, and Doc Gooden gets 2 strikes right off the bat. No balls, 2 strikes. And the third pitch he threw, R.J. Reynolds hit a home run to make it 2-1.
Wow.
I'll never forget it. So my first managing game, my first hitter hit a home run to put us on the board 2-1. We ended up losing 4-2.
I love that it's just right there in the memory as if it were yesterday. And I have to ask about Barry Bonds and what you said earlier, tough love and being honest with players. There's obviously the famous clip of you and Bonds going at it, but the respect that Barry Bonds has for you, did it stem from something like that where you were honest with him, where you challenged him, and a lot of guys might be afraid to do that with him?
Barry was one of those guys that he was a very interesting player to handle. I loved him. I love him to this day. I talked to him, still talk to him to this day. We went in the Pirate Hall of Fame together last year. He was a very interesting guy. Barry was one of those guys that needed to have a chip on his shoulder to play good. He had to be a little mad about something, and that's the type of player he was. And Barry was one of those guys that if he thought you liked him and you were making a fuss over him all the time and trying to get next to him and all that, he didn't like that. So I always tried to keep him guessing whether I liked him or not. And some days I would walk by him and not really talk to him, and other days I would be real friendly, and I tried to keep him guessing. And I could see sometimes, like would think, I could just see when I walk away. He's like, I don't know if this old man likes me or not, But he was so much fun to manage. It just played all the time. Great left fielder, best left fielder I ever saw. His arm wasn't as good as some, obviously, but as far as going to get the ball, he's the best left fielder I ever saw. And he was one of those players like that. If he wasn't hitting, he didn't want anybody on the other team to get any hits either. Yeah. He'd take hit after hit away. This guy was just so focused and such a great player. It's unbelievable and very, very intelligent, very high IQ, very bright guy.
I just see a lot of similarities with the IQ, the hitting acumen between he and Miguel Cabrera. It's like the righty and lefty version of each other in a way.
Yeah, no question about it. Barry had that short, powerful swing. Barry was one of the few guys that could take that fastball, pull it down the right field line, and keep it fair. A lot of guys when they pulled it, they'd come around a little bit more and it'd be a foul ball. But Barry pulled those hands in. Somehow he could keep that ball fair. He could hit a ball right down the right field line. In most cases, it would curve foul. Barry's did not. They stayed straight. They went out of the ballpark. And he had that short, powerful swing, and he had such a great eye. Him and Cabrera both, I think all great hitters have one thing in common. I think they pick up the ball much quicker than the guys that don't hit as good. And Cabrera and Bonds picked up the ball pretty much out of the pitcher's hand.
Unreal. Jim, I was watching that Hall of Fame speech that you made, and I noticed when you spoke about the 2017 World Baseball Classic, you began to get emotional. You got choked up. Representing the United States, what did that mean for you and bringing that team together to win?
Well, I've always been honest about this stuff, and I'm going to be honest again today. I was not a big fan of the World Baseball Classic. I was scared. I was scared to death about the Baseball Classic just before I managed it. Because you're asking players to amp up a little quicker than they normally would in spring training. And I had a lot of players, some of my Latin players like Cabrera and Victor Martinez, and all those guys were going to be gone to play in those games. And I was scared to death. I didn't really like it that much, to be honest with you. And then, after I got out and Commissioner Manfred and Joe asked me if I would like to manage it in 2017, obviously, you get a chance to manage for your country, you're going to take it. So, it was very interesting. Joe put a really good team together. He did so much legwork to get all the players. I talked to a few, but Joe was responsible. He was like the general manager, and he was responsible for putting that team together. And then, when we got together, we worked out in Fort Myers. We played a couple games in Fort Myers against Boston and the Twins. And we had our workout, and I could see immediately that this team was on a mission. We had a special group of players, and I could see from the whole time that they were on a mission. And it was very funny because we almost got beat the first game against Colombia. We won in extra innings, and it was very interesting how we did it. But we beat them all. I mean, we beat Venezuela, we beat Puerto Rico, we beat Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic beat us one game, but we beat them when we had to. We beat Japan, we beat Canada. So we beat them all. We played them all, we beat them all. And it was one of the most memorable and great experiences that I've ever had.
Why? You mentioned how the team came together almost unlike any other team that you saw. What was it? How did they come together so fast? Because you're not managing 162 games in spring training. You're only together for like a month.
Right. Well, I didn't really know these guys at all other than manage against some of them. But when they came to the clubhouse, we had a little meeting, and these guys were on a mission to show that the United States was the best baseball. I really believe that. And they were just not there to play through this tournament and get back to spring training. They were there to prove something, and they certainly did that.
Before I get to my final segment, I have to bring up one player because I love him from when he was in Erie, and that's Don Kelly. And Don Kelly, DK, is now the manager of the Pirates, kind of following in your footsteps. You had him in Detroit. What did you see in Don Kelly that made you want to keep him on the roster with the Tigers?
Well, he was a very valuable player. He was a very underrated player. Now, he wasn't a regular and he wasn't a great player, don't get me wrong, but he was a perfect guy to have on your team. He could play multiple positions. He was always ready to play. He wasn't upset when he didn't play. He wasn't a pain in the neck in the clubhouse. He didn't stir up any controversy or anything. He was a guy that knew who he was as a player and knew what he could bring to the party and was always ready to do that whenever you called on him. And he actually got some big, big hits. Hit a home run in a playoff game off Nova with the Yankees in the first inning. Drove in a winning run against Oakland in the playoffs with a sac fly. I mean, this guy, when you're a big league player, you're really good, even if you're a utility player. I don't think people realize how good these guys have to be to get to the big leagues and play. So Donnie got several years as a player in the big leagues, and it was just because he could do so many things, and he was a perfect utility guy. He was perfect. The right demeanor, the right mentality, right approach, ate right, slept right, always ready to do, anything that you ask. And he also and I think it's helped him to this day now as he's managing. He watched the game all the time. He was always engaged in the game. Some players, when they're sitting on the bench after at bats and that, they can wander a little bit and things mentally and everything. But Donnie was into the game at all times, and I think that's something that's going to help him in his managerial career.
What was the phone call like? Because I know he called you after he gets the managerial position with the Pirates during this season.
Well, it was great. He just called me, and I had sent him a text to congratulate him, and he called me, and we talked, and he was looking for a little advice if I had any, and I didn't really have a lot of advice for him. I wasn't going to get into preaching to him, but I did tell him one thing. I said, just be Donnie Kelly. Don't try to be somebody that you're not. Just be yourself, and trust your gut, and trust what you've learned over the years about baseball. Trust your instincts, but don't try to be somebody that you're not. Just be Donnie Kelly, and if you do that, you're going to be fine.
And it also helps that he brought back one of your best friends and one of his former coaches, Gene Lamont. I mean, that has to be so cool for you to see those two together.
Yeah, it's great. Well, they had a relationship as well in Detroit. Gene was coaching there, so Donnie and Gene knew each other very well, and were very, very, very good friends, obviously. And I think it was really a bright move on Donnie's part to bring Gene back. Gene's one of the best all-around baseball guys I've ever been around. Scouting, managing, developing. Uh, there's nobody better in my opinion. So I think Donnie really made a smart move there.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Skipper, I want to do this segment that I do with all my guests. It's called This Just In. It's rapid fire questions. You give your answer. I might have a follow up. We'll see. But the best team that you ever managed, because not always, as you said, is it the team that wins the World Series, but the best team that you ever managed.
Yeah, it was probably the 97 Marlins. 2013 Tigers come real close, but probably the 97 Marlins.
Need to win one game. Who's your starting pitcher?
Sandy Koufax.
Okay. How about players that you managed?
Uh, I guess you'd have to say uh, Verlander probably.
Okay. Sandy Koufax was a pretty good choice.
Yeah.
More nervous, Game 7, 97, or heading into the WBC championship game?
97.
Better all-around hitter, Bonds or Cabrera?
Uh, Bonds probably, but I always, when somebody asks me that question, I always answer it like this: Cabrera best right-handed, Bonds best left-handed.
A player in history you would have loved to have managed?
Don Zimmer.
Really? Why?
Well, I just think that he was such a character, and I think he had a great arm. I know people always tell me about him, and I just would have loved to watch Popeye play. He became one of my best friends. We managed against each other. I would have loved to watch him play.
I love that you just called him Popeye because this leads to my next question. Do you have, I believe it's the 1986 Topps baseball card of yourself with the Pittsburgh Pirates, almost looking like a top hat? anywhere in your house?
No,
All right.
that coal miner hat's long gone.
Can you believe that was the first hat you had to wear as a major league manager?
Oh, it was, you know what? It was so ugly, but it was also the most popular selling hat of all the hats
That is awesome.
for marketing. It was
Yeah.
the most popular. Unbelievable.
The game that you think about the most when you can't fall asleep at night in your career?
Probably the Braves in '92.
Why?
Well, we lost that game. We had a 2-0 lead in the ninth, and we ended up losing that game, which would have sent us to the World Series. So that's probably the one that hurts the most.
So when you look back and you think about it, is there anything that you would have done differently in that game?
No.
Then it's just one of those things, right? If you can go back and say, no, I wouldn't change it, then you did your job.
I did what I felt gave us the best chance to win the game.
And finally, the call that you're going to the Hall of Fame. What were the emotions? What did it feel like that moment?
Well, that was pretty emotional because my family was with me. Obviously, they were coming up the steps when I got the call. I didn't think I got in because it was quite a while after they said you could possibly get the call between this time frame. And, quite a few minutes went by and I hadn't got the call. So I went upstairs, kind of lay down and, just no more than I laid down. My family was coming up the steps and I got the call. Pretty emotional.
Wow, that's incredible. I love it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. I used to do a lot of games at Fox with Eric Karros, and he and I would joke when we would do a game of the Tigers and you were the manager, we always knew when the meeting was ending when you would light up a cigarette. So with that being said, I think it's time to light up a cigarette because this podcast is ending. Jim Leyland, thank you so much for doing this. It was so much fun. You're a baseball guy through and through. This was an absolute blast for me. Thank you so much.
All right, Justin. Thank you for having me.